Got it. So my name is Enrique Roman. I'm the Director of Community Services for those of you who I haven't met yet, but looking forward to working with you all. So the first and foremost, I do want to apologize to all. Unfortunately, I've been triple booked this morning, and there isn't 3 of me to go around. So I'm prioritizing meetings here. So I will, do the welcoming here today and introductions, and then I will be stepping out. But I will be leaving you guys in very good hands. Leslie, our HCBS specialist, is the expert on this here at Kern Regional Center. So you guys will be in good hands for this discussion today. But the reason why we have you all today here, the reason why we called you guys in, and I do realize this, in the grander scheme of things, it was a fairly short notice, is that we have received notification from the department. We received a directive back on December 1st about updates concerning the home and community-based waiver services evaluation period and so forth, and meeting our final rule requirements. So where we left off last March was, and as you all experienced this, we submitted our written plans as far as how we thought we were compliant with the final rule requirements. The state of California was at that time not only working on us, bringing us to compliance at that time, but also was working with CMS and the folks at the federal level to get an extension, to allow California some time to become fully compliant. So as of today, where we stand today, California did in fact receive that extension, and that extension was granted through the end of this year. But with that extension comes a lot of work, unfortunately, that we're going to have to do between now and then. And what we wanted to do with you all today is just kind of give you a walkthrough of that directive and what needs to happen between now and at the end of that extension that we were granted. Unfortunately, there's going to be a sense of urgency in the tone of this conversation today, because there's going to be a lot of work that needs to happen between now and the end of the year. I say the end of the year collectively, the state has a lot of work to do, but the work that we have to do, in a sense, has to be completed by September 30th, 2024. And Leslie, as she walks you guys through the directive, will give you the details as to what that means. So although we have a year to do this, the time that we have to complete it is limited. We don't have the full year. And the department also wants us to report on a every other week basis between now and then on our progress. So there will be a lot of activity between now and then. So with that said, I will say again that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I think for what it's worth, we are starting in a fairly decent place, right? We all have written plans that we said we were going to implement. So that is in fact what this review is about. Have we implemented the plans that we developed back in March of last year? So it's a different phase of this whole HCBS process. We have the plans in writing. You guys told the department how you would modify your programs to meet those requirements. And this go around, what we will be doing is essentially looking to see if you've implemented those plans that you developed last year. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, and I'm sure that you guys have more than likely already seen the directive. But in years past, right, the department was working with us and kind of, being flexible and so forth. And there really wasn't any sanctions to speak of with regard to compliance on HCBS. This directive, unfortunately, does put out sanctions as far as meeting these requirements, and if we don't meet the requirements, what might happen. So it's for lack of better terminology here, it's serious this time. We don't want anybody, falling into those sanctions. So we will do everything possible within our realm to prevent that from happening. But again, we do want to underscore the need to work together and really put the attention that this requires into this process and this project. Last March, it was hinted at, the withholding of 50% of your rate if we didn't come into compliance with submitting those written plans. That didn't happen. Even though we did go over with some of our providers over the time frame, that didn't happen. But this go around, the department again has put it in writing and so forth that it will happen this time if we don't comply. So it's the withholding of 50% of the payment and then up to and including devendorization if we're not in compliance with the final rule. So they did put some teeth into this directive. And again, we will do whatever it takes to prevent that from happening and work with you all. But we also need you all to assist us in preventing that from happening. So with that said, and again, I apologize for setting the tone in this way, but I just want to underscore the seriousness of what we have to do and what we have before us in these next few months. But with that, I will turn it over to Leslie and then Suzanne and Lynn. Suzanne Toothman, Lynn Clark, our two program managers for community services, are also on the call to field any questions that might arise through the discussion. But again, you're in good hands. Leslie will walk you through it. And I'm sure it's not going to be our only meeting. We'll have more of these discussions throughout the year as we go through this process. So with that, I thank you guys. Again, I apologize for starting the year with such a negative tone, but we just want to underscore the urgency of what we have before us. Okay. So with that, Leslie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Enrique. Okay, so I appreciate all you guys coming in today and chiming on this call. It is a big subject. I know that we all have been working together over the last several years, whether it's beginning with the site assessment 2019 and then entering the pandemic, how we started doing virtual site visits for our settings that were selected, and then how we moved into last year where we reviewed validation and remediation plans on HCBS for each of your sites. So with that, we've done quite a lot of groundwork on this. You guys written policies and implemented practices. And so what this next phase is going to look like is seeing these policies in place in a daily practice and helping you guys in that area to fully embrace basic assurances for our rights. So if ISIS could help me out.
Sorry, Leslie, I stopped being able to hear you. I can't. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, hopefully I wasn't muted for the whole.
No, it just cut off all of a sudden. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much I appreciate you assisting me on this. So I would like your help, Isis, if you could bring up the directive that we could review.
Okay.
So I do want to thank my team members as well as all of you guys vendors in working on these HCBS areas as well as helping in the next phase as we start. So we're going to do those site visits beginning, I want to say in the next week or so. We're going to start reaching out to you guys to schedule these site visits and to work together as a team to start implementing some of these areas. So I really want to thank my team members out there that are going to be supporting in this area, as well as our vendors for opening your doors and providing the services to our individuals, as well as opening and reviewing all these areas with us once more. And so thank you, ISIS, for bringing up the directive. So this directive was issued on December 1st. We met together as an agency over December to review how we're going to enact this directive within our agency to support you guys and to bring everybody to meet the areas of compliance. So with that, the purpose of this directive was to establish a monitoring timeline for the completion of required on-site reviews to confirm that all the HCBS settings have compliant policies, that the implementation of those policies are occurring through the site's practices and are in compliance with the HCBS settings. So we will be reviewing each one of your ISIS sites, each one of your vendor numbers. So it is quite a lot for our agency to schedule out. So we will be working with you guys on a timeline to meet these areas and schedule. So as soon as we set a date with you guys will receive a letter in an email to confirm the date, and we'll work together to ensure that we could do the visit and provide you the report right after, shortly after. And so the next area of this directive is to outline the steps in regards to how we're going to be implementing that as well. So so let's see, on the monitoring section, so each regional center was required to do a site visit for all their settings. So all the settings are listed out on the enclosure attachment of this directive, which includes the residential, the day, and employment services, as well as a few miscellaneous service codes for other services that we do provide, such as daycare and so forth. So we are including those services as well in this practice. So whoever had participated in the remediation process is going to be doing a site visit. So if you guys remember your remediation plans, that's the documents we will be reviewing during our site visits. And we will be also asking questions to your staff as well as to your individual serve in regards to how their services are meeting their rights. So during the site review, we will verify all the relevant federal requirements. So the requirements, as you guys know, for all settings, they are required to so for employment and day services, they are required to meet the first 5 federal requirements, and all the residential is required to meet all 10 requirements, which just further expands on those first 5 in more concrete areas, such as having residency agreements, ensuring that privacy is honored, as well as ensuring that individuals have ability to control their schedule and have access to food and visitors. And so with that, we are going to be reviewing those federal requirements with each of your settings to ensure that you guys are providing those areas. There is training information that is posted on DDS's website. As you guys may have dabbled into it, they have quite a lot of webinar videos, as well as a person-centered practice tool that was developed with the HCBS funding that most providers can utilize as a great Bible to kind of understand how the federal requirements go in line with person-centered planning. And so those training tools are available on the DDS website, as well as tools that we will be using as an agency. So Kern Regional Center has identified the tools that we will be using are the DDS tools that they had offered in the past. So it's going to look familiar. It's going to be the validation tool, which is going to verify your setting that you may have looked at during your remediation planning phase. We're going to be utilizing that tool, as well as the site assessment that DDS had implemented in 2021. And so that site assessment is going to be one of the main tools that we're going to focus on, that's going to have all the questions that our QAs are going to be asking during the visits, as well as the questions that they'll be asking individuals that are open to having that interview on site. And so we have these tools posted on our KRC website that we'll walk into a little later to show you guys where to find these tools. Okay. So we are wanting to work collaboratively with each of you guys to make the efforts to remediate any findings. So during these visits, we will try to encourage the conversations of what you guys can do to meet these areas. The self-assessment is a walkthrough questionnaire that asks, like, do you provide so-and-so? Is it a yes or a no? And if it is a no, we will try to work with you guys to identify how we could turn that response into a yes to offer that service to the individuals. And so we'll work collaboratively on site with you guys as well as afterwards. Because as you know, like everything is not very easy to do at once. So we'll work together and try to remedy that. And so we do identify once we do a site visit, we'll turn over a report to you guys, which is those 2 documents I mentioned. We will provide you that report and we will discuss the findings with you. If we're not able to remediate those findings within 10 days of that report, then we'll work towards a corrective action. And so that's the next phase of this document, is outlining the corrective action process that we will go through with addressing any of those little conflicting areas with one another. So that corrective action is outlined here on this directive. It's very specific. So after we review with you the findings, we'll work within 10 days to issue a corrective action, which will give us a timeline of 30 days. And on that corrective action, there are 3 specific areas that we're going to work towards to ensure that you guys are aware of. So one of them is identifying the federal requirement that is in noncompliance. And we'll provide you that information as well as a method of how we could remediate that finding. And that may be conversations with individuals to discuss these areas, or it could be a little bit larger with reviewing our policies and procedures that you have in place at your site to expand to meet that area of compliance. And with that, we'll work together. Our QA team will be going out on these visits, but they're not going to have all the answers. So we are going to have office hours available to our QA, as well as my contact information if you, as a vendor, have questions about these areas. In addition to that, we also have a vendor care seat contractor that applied for the HCBS grant funding. As you guys may have received their emails, Bakersfield ARC has graciously opened up their doors to support our vendors with applying for that grant. So they offer support in a manner of trainings, as well as support in the questions you guys might have that are kind of harder to answer. They are open to working collaboratively with you as well as with us in helping build that area. They have additional communities of practice that they hold once a month to our providers, where they could bring those questions into the vendor community and ask how we could work together to help support one another to meet those areas that are a little bit harder to grasp around. And so with that, we have those services to support you during that area that are going to be outlined on that corrective action plan. So we will identify a method of how you guys could remediate the findings, and then we will again reiterate the time frame for the service provider to meet these findings, which isn't going to exceed 30 days. So we'll work really closely together. Once we get those findings, we'll go back and forth and try to remedy that area. And then if there is areas where it's going to take a little bit more time, we will try to work together to create another timeline to meet that area. And so with that, that corrective action plan will be sent out to you guys for your signature, and we'll require your signature within 7 days of that receipt. And if you guys have any disagreements on that corrective action plan, you have to write it. You have to send it in writing to us so that we could document that, as well as identify a timeline for meeting that area if you guys have those disagreements, and we'll work collaboratively in that area. With that, the Regional Center will issue that cap, and it shall provide a copy of the signed document to everybody that's involved, and so to the provider as well as to the Regional Center. We have a timeline that we do have to meet. So these visits have to be completed. So all of our sites at KRC need to be completed by August 31st of this coming year. So it is very, very quickly coming around. And so we're going to start doing our visits as soon as we can start the scheduling, so you guys can be aware. But DDS did identify a timeline afterwards. So they identified that we shall submit any corrective action plans to submit them by September 30th. So hopefully by then we have all of our sites completed and we're able to identify if there is any corrective action plans. We have it set out before that deadline of September 30th. And so with that, the corrective action plans are quite hefty. And so what happens if you guys are unable to meet that corrective action plan within that time frame? So that is the sanctions that we're going to be discussing next. Isis, if you could scroll down just a little bit. Thank you. So the sanctions are pretty much that if the provider doesn't complete these actions that are listed on the CAP within their time frame, and you guys do not appeal, the regional center shall pursue the following sanctions progressively. And so this is the possibility of going into an immediate moratorium on referrals and authorizations for new referrals to your service. And so that's pretty serious. And the next phase after that would be meeting with each individual who's receiving services in your setting, as well as their authorized representative, to discuss the situation and offer alternative options if the provider does not remediate and meet that timeline. In addition, individuals served or the representative may elect to meet with the regional center remotely if they have questions and concerns in regards to that. And so it is quite large of a sanction to go forward. If the provider remains non-compliant after taking the above steps, the regional center shall implement a temporary payment withhold of 50% for services provided. The temporary payment withhold will remain in effect until the regional center has verified that the provider has complied with the corrective action plan, which time any funds withheld and released to the provider. So a temporary payment withhold may not exceed beyond 4-month period without the regional center concurrently pursuing the termination of the vendorization when a provider continues to be non-compliant with the corrective action. So it becomes serious to the possibility of the disenrollment of the provider. And so we encourage our providers to continue to work with us in identifying these areas to prevent us from entering that area of sanctions. But this is the teeth that Enrique had mentioned that DDS has put into place to ensure that each provider meets these rights for our individuals. And so, Isis, if you could scroll down just a bit more. So it's quite serious, and we hope to get each and every one of our providers to meet these areas, and we'll work together collaboratively. Can you scroll up just a little bit? Thank you. So the regional center also has to report to the department on these areas. So we will be providing the department with a list of providers that are implementing a temporary withhold payment, pursuing termination of the vendorization if we get to that period. So we will be having a timeline to work with informing the department on a practically biweekly basis to inform them of our progress towards each of these areas. And so hopefully we don't get to the corrective actions or the sanctions for each of our providers. We hope to work diligently with each and one of you to support you in this area. Now, I do want to mention the provider appeals. Should a provider disagree with the regional center's determination that they're not fully compliant with the HCBS federal requirements, the provider could appeal in writing to the director of the vendoring regional center within 30 days after that receipt of the written notification of the regional center's determination of noncompliance. So once you receive that report and you have disagreements, you can put that in writing to the regional center, and we will work to support you guys in accordance with the Title 17 requirements and regulations that we abide by. And so guidelines for the regional center's reporting activities and compliance data is forthcoming. DDS is continuing to offer assistance and guidance with this area. So we will inform you guys if there are any changes in the timelines, as well as if there's any additional support that the department is providing. They have mentioned that they will be offering trainings in the near future for our vendors as well as our individuals served in regards to these subjects of embracing the home and community-based services final rule requirements. And so if you guys have questions or your individuals have questions in regards to these, you're always welcome to reach out to the DDS inbox to contact them, as well as myself or any of our counterparts here at KRC to support you guys in these areas. And so now with this directive, I have posted on our KRC website an area that you could access this directive, as well as the guidance and additional training opportunities that are available on the DDS website, as well as outlining the support that we're offering during this on-site monitoring phase that we're going to be entering. So if Isis, if you could open the KRC website so we could show our providers where to go. So, all right, thank you. So under the service providers tab, we have labeled the CMS final rule and HCBS page. And so this page includes a little bit about what HCBS is, how it affects our individuals, as well as your services, what it looks like for compliance, as well as information and the latest guidance that we just reviewed today on the ongoing monitoring practices. So Isis, if you could scroll down to the latest guidance area. Okay, okay. All right, so we did post our vendor training that we have held today, as well as the monitoring. So the next phase, just a little bit below, Isis. Okay, so that monitoring section includes the forms that we're going to be using during our visits, so that you guys are not blindsided. These forms are available to you guys to review. There are non-residential and residential forms. So for non-residential, that means that's the form for our day programs and our employment services and any service that's under those miscellaneous codes. Our residential providers will be doing a longer form, which is the validation form, as well as the site assessment. So these documents are there and available to you guys to review prior to our visits. We do want to let you know that we will be reaching out to you within a week or so to start scheduling visits. It is very important that we try to hold these visits due to our time-sensitive timelines. So once we schedule a visit, hopefully it works for all parties. And if there's those concerns, please let us know right away so we could book you on another site date visit. And so we will be emailing you guys with one of the emails that we have reached out to you today. If you have a new email, please let us know. You could reach out to myself to let us know if you have updated contact information. So once we do foresee completing the site visit, we will be generating a report and emailing it to you. If we identify that the services are non-compliant, we'll work within that 10 days of sending out that report to remedy those areas and those findings. But if we exceed those 10 days, we'll start forming that corrective action plan with you guys to identify the areas where we will work together to meet and progress through that timeline. And if you guys do need that more time, please let us know and we'll try to work diligently with you guys in that area. In addition, I do want to let you guys know again that I am available to support you guys, as well as our KRC contractor, which is Bakersfield ARC, to aid you guys with that technical assistance aspect in the forms of trainings that they offer on topics, as well as in the communities of practice, to help you guys in those tougher areas that you guys might need that additional assistance with. And so with that, we will be looking at each of the services vendors numbers. So if you guys have multiple services, multiple vendor numbers, we're going to be reviewing each one of those areas. Okay. And so now if you guys have any questions on this directive, feel free to reach out after this meeting, or if you'd like, you could turn on your mics and we can answer some of those questions now. Okay.
I did have a question. So when it comes to when you're doing the site inspections, you're going to be looking at our validation or remediation plan, making sure that as far as we have that present and available, And then whatever's documented in there, you're gonna double check that against what's the practices in this setting, and then looking at your tools real quick. So there's gonna be a component in which you pivot to the provider, but then there's aspects of it you'll be pivoted to the staff and the residents as well. Yes.
Yes, so we will be looking at all the documentation that you send over in that validation remediation phase. So those are your policies that you have drafted and written out. And then we will be working with doing that site visit where we will be asking the questions, whether it's to the administrator or the staff that are present during that site visit, to answer the uh, more questions that we have, as well as the questions that we have for individuals that are open to being interviewed. And so we'll be asking those questions to help determine if the setting is meeting it in practice a little bit more. Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay. So I once more would like to thank each and every one of you for working with us in meeting these new areas of these federal requirements over these last few years. And so I really appreciate all the effort you guys put into ensuring that our individuals have these rights to these basic assurances for the access to the community, for choosing where they would like to reside or participate daily. Um, and ensuring that they have the ability to maximize on that privacy and dignity and respect when receiving your services. So I appreciate you guys all for implementing these areas and fully embracing the final rule and its intent. It is quite a big area to review and to identify in writing, and as well as in practices with each and every one of your individuals. So each setting is unique, each individual is unique, and so I really appreciate all the efforts you guys do in providing your services. Okay.
Leslie, are you wanting everybody to sign in? I know she mentioned that at the beginning, but I was just scrolling through and it doesn't look as though we have very many folks that put their name and who they're representing.
Yes. So if you guys could drop your name and your agency in the chat box, so that way we could get record of attendance. Thank you.
Hey, Leslie, there is some questions in the chat. One of the first questions is from Angela. It says, this being the first year, is there some leeway in getting into compliance?
Yes, so there is some support. So as you guys had developed your plans in writing last year, there can be updates that you guys might need to do, or you might identify during the site visit to build on your compliance. As you know, not everybody is going to perfectly have it on spot. We all grow in these areas, and so we learn new ways of practicing. And so with that, when we do our site visits, it'll be bringing a perspective to those areas of what we're looking at. It will allow you guys to identify those areas with the QA during the visit, to identify, hey, like let's turn this into a yes response, that we do offer this to our individual. How could we go about that? So it allows that flexibility to identify that during that time period. And I did mention there is that little leeway of 10 days. So after you guys have that site visit, I hope that you guys are able to identify that and work diligently within those 10 days of receiving that finding report to implement whatever policy and procedure you need to implement, or conversations that you have with individuals, and documenting that you did follow through with identifying those areas to meet that compliance. And sometimes it can take a little bit longer. And so after that 10-day grace period, and we start working towards that corrective action plan together, we will identify further additional support that you might need, whether that is identifying federal requirement that was in non-compliance, as well as an area of how you guys could remediate that finding. And so we will brainstorm with you guys to meet that area and implement that. And we do have that timeline with the corrective action plan of 30 days. However, if you guys do identify that you guys do need more time to have those conversations, you do need a little bit more time to finalize those policies that you guys are going to be implementing, then we work together to extend that. But we cannot extend it over a certain time frame. So we do still have to abide by Title 17's regulations, which specify how long we can go, as well as the areas where DDS identified in the sanctions is that if it goes over a 4-month period, we have to work towards that devendorization process. So there is that area of time. Hopefully we don't get to that area, but we will work diligently and collaboratively with you. We just need to ensure that we all are working towards the same goals of wanting to ensure that your services continue on in supporting our individuals in these areas. So we will work together with you guys in those areas, and we will continue to identify resources and support that you guys might need to meet these areas. Okay. All right. And is there another question?
There's someone asked if we can send the documents, a link to the documents topic we'll be using. I'm guessing it's the.
Okay, so we can send it out again with this directive, as well as the documents that we will be using, as well as the KRC website, so you could access it there as well.
I did put your email in the chat if anybody needs it and they don't have it, it's in the chat.
Question in regards to the consultant that's working with your guys' regional center, if it's available and possible for them to work with a specific provider, would that extend the August deadline to allow for time for the consultant, or would it have to be met within that expedited time frame?
So you guys are able to work with consultant at any point. They are working with providers and offering trainings as well as communities of practice to enter those areas. And I believe that they are open to working one-on-one. I don't know if Bakersfield ARC is on this call right now that they might like to chime in, but they are offering additional support for our providers to remedy in this area of remediation. We do have those timelines with DDS that identified with the corrective action plan. So if we do extend past those dates, Bakersfield ARC's grant does exceed past that date. So they can continue to offer support in that area up until March of next year. But we foresee that we will continue to support you guys to meet that before DDS's deadlines that they've established. So we will be having these visits completed, hopefully all by August 31st of this year. We will work towards completing all the corrective action plans by September 30th of this year. And then hopefully we remedy all these areas by the end of December, which DDS identified as the final notice of all services to be in compliance.
We had another question. How soon are KRC scheduling visits?
So we are going to be starting to reach out shortly this week to start giving our providers a heads up of at least maybe a week. I know we are on tight schedules around here, and I know each one of you guys have all your services that you guys do offer. So it is quite a lot to squeeze in. So we will try to work with you guys to schedule a date, at least with a week's notice or a little bit more, depending on each of our staff that is going to be assisting in this area to schedule those visits.
And then we had another question from Luis. It says, how about house rules?
Okay, so house rules, that's a big subject and it's very specific. So house rules is an area where we are determining that there is some follow-up that might be needed in that area. So we want to ensure that our house rules for our residential services are based on values, that you guys uphold the values versus identify restrictions. And so what that looks like is identifying that you guys emphasize privacy in the areas of supporting our individuals, that you guys identify respecting individuals that live in the setting to support one another, and how to respect privacy as well as respect for others that are living in the same household, to not exactly identify concerns like, let's say a restriction is for visitors. So you guys cannot identify directly visitors are from 8 to 10. Visitors have our individuals can have the right to visitors at any time. And so what we identified for house rules is continuing to support our individuals to have house meetings with one another where they could establish the norms and the values that they want to uphold in the home, to respect one another's areas, such as understanding that some individuals would like to go to bedtime a little bit later, others would like to have a little visitors come at a different hour, and where they could meet with one another on meeting those areas of house rules. And so it is a big change, because I know many of our providers have identified strict guidelines for establishing strict rules for the house, such as everybody goes to bed by 8 p.m. on weekdays, or everybody needs to have visitors between 8 to 10 and so forth. So we're trying to move away from those areas where we identify strict restrictions in those areas and limitations, to be more open and to work towards collaborating with one another versus setting strict rules. I hope that answers your question.
And then Bakersfield ARC did drop contacts in the chat for HCBS. Contact Irene Arellano, and they've left their email there as well.
Thank you so much for dropping that, Jaime. Irene is the great contact. So if you guys are interested in attending trainings on HCBS topics, they have quite a lot. I do want to highlight there is a training this week on a very important subject, which is the dignity of risk. And so it is very important subject, as many of you guys know. With these HCBS rules, there are quite a lot of openness to allowing our individuals to control their schedules, to allowing individuals to have visitors at any time, and to support individuals to have privacy. And so with that, and access to food at any time. And so there are a lot of risks that might be alongside that. So this webinar that's coming up this week on Thursday offers more information on that subject of how you could support your individuals when accessing a dignity in those risky times, and where you guys might need that additional support. So Bakersfield ARC has additional trainings that they offer. They have worked together with the Council of Quality and Leadership to provide these trainings. So it's Bakersfield ARC additional support to discuss those settings. And so if you guys would like to get on their email list, I highly encourage you guys to reach out to Irene to get on that email list, to be updated on those trainings that are available, as well as the communities of practice where you could raise those questions as a vendor, as a service provider, to discuss together and figure out how to remedy some of these areas that you guys might find conflicting, like the house rules. And so if you guys have questions on those areas, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to support you guys. And if you guys don't feel comfortable reaching out to Bakersfield ARC, I'm here for you guys to aid in any way that you guys may need in this discussion.
We had another question with, does federal rule number 10 apply to only residential services?
So it does actually apply to all of our settings. So if you all can recall, federal requirement number 10 is the accessibility rule. So it means that your setting should be accessible to the individual served's needs. And so whether the individual utilizes a wheelchair or the individual utilizes additional supports, that you guys do offer those supports in your setting. And so that applies to the residential, and it applies to our day and employment services, to be able to have their setting accessible to the individual. Okay. Okay, I see that Valerie from Bakersfield ARC dropped into the chat. They do have the extensive training in March with the CQL, where they will have 10 slots available to do a deep dive into reviewing how you guys could assess your setting to be in more compliance with the HCBS final rule. So that class is, I believe it's a 6-day training where they will review each one of these areas of the basic assurances. So I highly encourage you guys, if you guys have the time available to participate in that training, they have that available to you guys. And so it does require registration prior to for that commitment. So
We do have a hand raised. Aaron has his hand raised. And then we have a couple more questions in the chat.
And so if you guys are interested in that intensive training, Bakersfield ARC, Irene is your contact. So just reach out to her and she'll help you get scheduled on that March training. And so I highly encourage each and every one of our providers to continue to document your efforts. So if you have attended this training and you have attended other HCBS related training topics in the past, that you guys document that in your personnel records in that in-service training area, because that will be also an area that we will review during our site visits is, are you guys training on this? Are you guys informing your individuals about their rights and understanding what the HCBS means to them? So if you guys have documentation of that, I encourage you guys to list that out or participate in these free trainings that our agency is offering with Bakersfield ARC so that you guys have that. Okay, and I believe, Irene, you mentioned that Aaron had a question? Or
Yeah, he has his hand raised.
Okay, Aaron, feel free to ask.
Okay, so my question is regards to the forms that are posted on the website there. There's the two forms, the validation form and the site assessment form. So is it in the intention that both of these forms will be used for each visit?
Yes, so that is the intention. We are using each of those forms. So we are going to use the validation form, which may look familiar to some of your settings that you guys completed. So that is to verify that your policies that you've written are now being implemented in practice. So that will be the documentation review aspect for our QAs to look at during those site visits. They'll have the opportunity to review it prior to the site visit that they hold with you guys. And then that secondary document, the site visit, will be the questions that they asked further at your site. And that will include the interview with the individual if available.
So the provider's filling out the validation form prior to your visit?
No, so the QAs that are going to be completing the visit will be completing that form.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. That helps.
You're welcome. And so you guys are welcome to review those forms, to ask questions on them, but our QA team will be filling out those forms. I always encourage providers. I like to proactively do things. So if you guys would like, you guys are always welcome to look at those forms and ask those questions on yourself and do your own little self-assessment on where you guys lie on these areas so that you guys can know, like, okay, you know what? We do need to update this to meet that area. And you guys could remedy that prior to us visiting out. And so that could always help with giving you guys a little bit more time in meeting those areas.
We had another question in the chat asking if the IPP is going to change.
So there is conversations of the IPP changing on the DDS level of identifying areas, but it is depending on each regional center to implement changes in their IPP. We, as an agency here at KRC, have implemented trainings for our service coordinators to have person-centered practice training to build on those areas of meeting the needs of the individuals and specifying further. However, our IPPs might not change for a while until it is finalized by our either our directors or our case management to make more specific changes. However, with that, it is still advised that conversations are still held with the service coordinators to implement some of these areas because it is a shared conversation to implement these areas. So it is identifying the individual selects the setting, so where they like to reside or where they like to spend their day, that the individual selects where they would like to participate and be offered options. And so part of the HCBS requirements is also on our providers to ask these questions, as well as our agency to continue to offer the options as well. But it is recommended that our providers, our residential and our day, ask the questions, were you offered other opportunities? If no, how you guys could support the individual to have that conversation with their service coordinator is recommended so that they could explore and find the right fit. Because as you guys know, you guys have to do a delicate matching process when you provide services. or else it's not going to be a right fit, and there will be many challenges. And so you want to encourage your individual to really choose the setting that they want to participate in, and that they are offered other options if they say, hey, I really wanted to do this, but I can't find it, that you guys support them in that area to whether that's seeking employment, or seeking a service that is going to be more aligned with their interests that they have. And so these conversations are still recommended to encourage to further implement in the IPP as well as in their settings. So I hope that answers your question for the IPP.
Thank you. One question is, there are some locations that are considered, what's it called? Enhanced scrutiny or something like that, that differentiate themselves from like the other homes. I'm assuming those will be the homes you guys will see first in your timeline for between now and August, followed by the other programs. For the benefit of those that may not know what that is, what does that look like for the community in terms of how soon we expect to see you in those kind of settings?
So we hope to do visits at each of our sites for those areas that identify similar areas of meeting that heightened scrutiny, which heightened scrutiny is, in more basic terms, it is isolating individuals from the broader community. If the setting has any indication of that, then we will continue to support them in that area. But we will work with our providers in attending those visits. I will support in those areas where we might identify the setting might be identified to have that isolating effect a little bit more closely, but they will still have the same timelines, and we'll try to work closely with them to meet these areas.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, is there any other questions?
Yeah, real quick question. So what is KRC's well, not policy, what are your guidelines in regards to when we need to restrict the individual due to them, not complying with some of the things that we need to do in the facility? Prime example, an individual not going to appointments, and we know that it's a health and safety risk. What do you guys need from us as providers to say, hey, we need to somehow get something in writing that this guy needs to start going to appointments, or we need to start doing things to make sure he's compliant, even though it is his right not to go to appointments? What is the process that KRC is going to put in place in order to make sure that those type concerns and issues are met?
Thank you. I really appreciate your question. That is a very, very important question. And so I want to highlight that this training that's coming up this week that Bakersfield ARC is hosting with the Centers of Quality and Leadership on dignity of risk, it will provide you a lot of direction in that area of how to support individuals when they do that risky concerns that don't go in alignment with your services, your facilities, to ensure that their health and safety is met. In addition to that, I do want to encourage you to have those conversations with the individual as to why they might have those concerns in place with attending those medical appointments. Identifying whether that could be a person-centered concern with that doctor specifically, or with just the manner of the way they're receiving services. Maybe the staff they feel they attend appointments with may not support them in that area that they feel comfortable with. And so you start on that person-centered level with the individual. You reach out to their planning team to support them. That could be their service coordinator, their family members, anybody that is in their circle of support, to continue to aid them and to raise your concern and figure out a way to work collaboratively with everybody involved with your individual. So it'll continue to work with case management in that area to identify. And if there's those grander concerns, we will work together to support you to meet those areas and identify a plan of how you can support that individual further. And so I can't give you a full direction of how it's going to be procedural, because it's going to be on that case by case with each individual. And so you really have to work with that individual to figure out what supports they might need to meet that area that you are concerned about, for them to meet that health and safety concerns.
So when those concerns come up, though, I'm guessing my question too also is that something, once it gets to that level, that KRC will be taken to their legal team? Is that something that KRC will be involved in clients' right with? in that respect, that's what I mean in regards to like the procedures. Like, is there, after we've gone through everything we might have gone through, is there, again, legal ways that you guys have to, make sure that things are documented correctly? Is clients' rights involved? Who contacts them and things of that nature?
Yes, so definitely they'll loop in who they need. It's all in that case by case with that unique individual's needs. And so it could go in that direction that you might need that additional support in those other disciplines to get involved. But it really comes to that case by case. Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, Irene, I'm not sure if I answered all the questions in the chat, so please let me know if I missed one.
No, there's no more questions in the chat.
Actually, hi, I'd just like to get some feedback on something. In Roseman, we've been without contracted transportation services for many years. And when we first opened, we actually I used to personally go to various programs in order to identify the best day program for the clients. Unfortunately, we've kind of been in a situation for many years where we've kind of been restricted to the day programs that offer transportation. And I know that choice of services is a real big part of HCBS. Are transportation issues and broader issues, sort of like what Dante mentioned, are those going to kind of be looked at in terms of choices and options that clients have?
So yeah, that is a big concern. So you're looking at the area that your individual is located. So your facility is an area that doesn't have very many resources available around you. So that is taken into consideration as to how you could support your individuals to maximize in those areas. We do want to identify too that resources can be available to the individuals that aren't even regional center services. So if there are programs and activities that the individual would like to do that are available in their area, that they have access just like anybody else. So if individuals wanted to attend exercise classes, that they have the ability to access what's around them. And so we do take into consideration what is available in your geographical area. And we won't count that against you if it is quite the distance away, but we want to ensure that it comes from that person-centered approach, that you identify with the individual how they would like to participate their daily life in. And so does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Hi, I have a quick question. What if our facility, the home that we have, is not close to any services that are being offered for the individuals? Because I know part of the HCBS component is to take a look at the proximity of the location to the services offered around it. We have several homes that are pretty far distance from any other type of services offered, where, for instance, we have some homes where it takes about 45 minutes to get transferred to a day program, 45 minutes to get transferred to a doctor, dentist, whatnot, because the home itself is maybe in the desert or in a location that's not very conducive to like a neighborhood type of setting, So what about that? How does that factor into the HCBS?
Yeah, so it's kind of similar to the question that Terrence posed earlier. So we do take into consideration your geographical area and the resources around. We encourage you to look at that person-centered approach with each individual in your service to identify what their interests and needs are and how you could support them. Sometimes our regional center resources are scarce, and so you really can open up to the broader community to see what resources are available that are close by that the individual is interested in, how you could support them to access that. And that may be the development of more conversations with the service coordinator and the planning team to implement these areas, to identify those resources. And so it's a collaborative approach that you'd have to take with that. But we do identify that there are settings where there might not be that many resources around you. And so we just want to encourage that you try to focus on that person-centered approach and meeting that individual where they're at. Because yes, it is quite difficult when there's not much around, but we got to look at what we do have around.
We had one more question that says, so is every resident going to have their own mediation plan?
If you want to see it that way, you could, but no, we are not expecting it at that level. Each individual is unique, though. You do want to identify that with that individual, they will need that support in a manner that meets their needs. So for the general, HCBS is looking at the broad scope. So we are wanting to provide them the basic assurances to the final rule. So that is basic assurances to accessing the community. And that looks differently for everybody. And so it could be looking at your individuals and saying, okay, we identify that you're very independent in accessing the community, or we might identify you need additional supports when you're accessing the community and what that looks like for that individual. And so it can be tailored specifically to each individual to meet these areas. And so you could look at it at that perspective to support your individuals. Does that help answer your question? Okay. Was that able to answer your question, Lois?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate each and every one of you guys' time here today. I believe it's 11 o'clock. If you guys have more questions, feel free to ask, or you could reach out directly to me for those specific questions in regards to your site. Okay. So Isis has dropped my information in the chat, and I'm sure you guys all have received an email from me at one point. So you guys could reach out. Email, calls are more than welcome, always.
Leslie, can you stay on for a moment? I have a couple of internal questions.
Okay.
Anybody else who wants to from KRC?
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.